Welcome back. Today we're going to tie a hare's ear soft hackle. This used to be one of my favorite patterns to tie. Not the hare's ear itself, but this style. I used to love tying these soft hackles, and you'd see them in the magazines and everything, and they just have these perfect partridge feathers just splayed out, and everything just looks so neat and clean. So it used to be a pattern that I used to try and imitate a lot. On top of that, it's also a very effective pattern. It's a great imitation for caddis emergers. You can do mayfly emergers if you tailor your colors to it. It'll catch fish for sure. I just think that there's a couple out there that are a little bit more effective in that regard. A lot of times these feathers, the partridge especially, will kind of fold back a little bit, and you miss kind of some of the wings coming out, and maybe the air bubble or whatever it may be. But this is, like I was saying, a really good caddis imitation, but can also double as a mayfly emerger imitation. So we're going to go ahead and tie that. I have this on, this is a size 10 today, Daiichi. It's a 1X short, or a 1X long, I should say. Probably on the bigger side of what I would tie these in. Typically 12 to 16 is what I would tie these. And then I'm also going to use this is a down eye. This is a Nymph hook. It's a 1560. Sometimes I'll tie them in a dry fly hook as well. This one's a little bit better because it's a heavier gauged wire, and a lot of times when you're fishing wet flies in general, the majority of the fish that you pick up are going to be on the swing, because that's when your fly starts its ascent up through the water. And these ones will stand up a little bit better than what your dry fly hooks will, because, like I said, it is a heavier gauged wire, and it'll take a little bit more of a beating than those. Your dry fly hooks will have a tendency to bend on you, depending on how aggressive the eat is. But we'll go ahead and start on this one today. We're going to do this with a off-colored red thread. I'm just going to take this up, and I'm going to leave it prior to the eye. I'm going to have about an 1/8 to a 1/16 of an inch right there, and I'm just going to start by building a thread base. And then this is a 3-part fly, by the way, 3 materials to it, so it's pretty quick, pretty simple to tie. I'm going to take, that's a beat up feather right there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I want to take a good feather to show, though, so you can get. This is a Coke de Leon fiber. This is a great tailing material. This is great for if you're on the small side on these feathers. Like this one, I wouldn't palmer. I wouldn't use for these wets. But this is a great tailing material right here. You can see the barred brown and black. It's just a perfect tail imitation, perfect leg imitation. It really is just a good material to work with. So I'm going to take about a half dozen strands, and there's one there that I didn't really like. What's up, Knox? Little black dog. So I'm going to take about a half dozen strands. I'm going to leave it about the length of the hook. Just measure that out real quick, and then get this tied in. And then I'm going to take it all the way up to where I left, or where I started my thread, I should say. And then once I get to that point, I'm going to fold that over, and that's just going to help build my taper just slightly. If you go ahead when you first tie that in and you cut it off right at the tie-in point, what you're going to wind up with is you're going to have a thicker portion, and then you're going to have a little dip. You're going to have a little bump that will be a little bit difficult to have a nice clean taper throughout the entirety of your fly. Dry flies, nymphs, wets, especially, you know, the mayflies. Mayflies especially have a very pronounced taper. Caddis, you can get away with it a little bit because they're more of just kind of like a stick body. But the mayflies have a very distinct taper, and that's something that you want to try and duplicate with your flies. Not only because it makes a better representation, but it also teaches you steps for more complex flies down the road, especially in your dry flies. You're always trying to enhance that taper, and that is what will set a well-tied fly apart from, you know, a poorly tied fly is that taper. But we'll keep going on this one. What I want to do now is, if I can find it, I probably got to cut another piece off here. We're going to go, speaking of tapers, we're going to go and enhance that even a little bit more. I'm going to take, this is size small. I could probably go up to a brassy. I wouldn't do a medium, but we're going to go with a size small. And tie this wire in. Now the temptation typically is to start it where you're going to start wrapping it right here. Well, if you start your wire right there, you fold it over, once again you've got a bump. What I'm going to do is take a tag end. I'm going to leave, I don't know, a ½ inch sitting there, and what I want to do is just work that back. I'm going to get this tied in. I'm going to bring this on the opposite side, and I'm going to take it about halfway back my hook. So then I want to cut that off. So now what this does is twofold. One, it helps you with your taper. I don't know if I'll be able to zoom in far enough when I'm doing the edit on this one, but if I turn this, you can see it's much wider right there than what it is back here, and it's already starting to aid in that taper that we're building. And I'm going to follow this back. I'm going to tie this off, but like I was saying, it's a twofold step right there. It helps with your taper, but it also keeps your wire in place. So now I can pull on this as much as I want. It'll break right there before it pulls out. You won't be able to pull that out from underneath the thread because it's doubled over. So now what we want to do is just take a few wraps forward, leave yourself enough room to work with, and then we're going to do a dubbing loop. And then I'm just going to smooth out that little bump right there. I had a couple of extra wraps from forming that loop, but just a few wraps right over top of it, and you can see that we're clear right now. We've got a nice even transition throughout the body of our fly. So I want to take and half hitch this, try not to catch it on any burrs that I have in my thumb, because it'll wind up fraying that thread out on me. But we're pretty clean as it sits right there. Now you've got a couple of options on this. Let's see if I can find where I put it. There we go. You got a couple of options on this for what you want to do for a body. I typically go with just the straight hairline, natural. You can pick it off of a hare's mask if you want, or you can go with this Antron. You can see this Antron has it's a natural and synthetic blend, and it has a little bit of a sparkle to it, a little bit of reflective property in that. I'll use it every once in a while, but for the most part, I like the natural. It's a little bit cleaner to work with. The Antron sometimes seems to be a little sticky to me, but I will use it. Maybe for like what would be a good one is a substitute for some peacock curl on a pheasant tail or something to where I'm just building the thorax, not where I'm trying to build an entire body like we're going to on this one. So we're going to go into the process of building this body here with our dubbing, and this is all just chopped up fibers, and there's one little piece right in here. Let me see if I can. Every once in a while with these naturals, you got to just look through it. There's this piece right here. I don't know how well you can see it on my thumb, but there's that piece right there. It's just like a hard piece. I don't know if it's part of the hide or if there's some fibers that got wet and just dried together like that. Whatever it may be, but those will create a little bump in your taper, and it'll be a little more difficult to form what you're trying to. So I usually just try and pick through those, eliminate those as much as possible, and then I'm going to place my dubbing into my loop. I'm going to spread this out a little bit, and I want the bottom section to be a little bit heavier with material than my top. And then I'm just going to take it, spin that. Everything's looking pretty clean so far. You're going to drop a little bit of this as you go through it, but I'm just going to pick that stuff out. There we go, that looks pretty good. I've got it a little bit heavier on the bottom section. Now I want to just make my first complete wrap, and then I'm going to check on this back side right here, make sure that I have good coverage, I don't have any thread exposed or anything like that, and then I'm just going to continue all the way up to the front, and you can see that natural taper starting to build slightly. I'm going to take it right to where I left off with my thread previously, and then just tie this off, get it out, and trim. So we're clean right there. We've got good taper going through there. Now with this taper, you can hide it a little bit when you're using these natural materials. Where you will find any inefficiencies or any bumps is when you go wrapping this on the counter wrap, which is what we're going to do right now. This will usually flatten some material out, and if you're going to have a bad section or a bad taper, this is where you're going to find it. Or it will also bring to light a good taper that you have, because as we're going forward, our wraps are going to be a little bit heavier, or our wraps are going to be a little bit higher off of the hook, and you'd have to really get in there and look really close at it to really notice it. But it does lay everything, it does enhance that taper a little bit. Once again, when this thing gets wet too, that's when you'll really notice it. But there's nothing really off on this one. I could have been a little bit lighter on that back side, maybe a little heavier on the front, but for the most part, that's a pretty clean taper right through there. So then the last thing that we're going to do to finish this off is I'm just going to build a quick thread base right in front of my dubbing. Be mindful that we're tying on a downturned eye. And I'm going to go back to the Coke de Leon on this. The Partridge, as you can see on this one, I've got it pretty well picked through. I mean, there may be one or two. The darker color is what I'm after on this one as well. This dark color right through here, I like to offset the color of the body, because I'm going with a lighter color on the body. I want this darker color, so it's pretty well picked through. And then even down through here on the lighter feathers, they're pretty well mainly for the smaller patterns, your 16s and below, but yeah, there's a couple of them that are beat up as well. So I'm going to go back with the Cote de Leon on this, and I'm going to find a really small, like my smallest feather that I can get. That's a little heavy. That one I like. This one should work here. So now, with this, there are a ton of different theories. You talk to 10 different fly tyers, you're going to probably hear 10 different ways that they wrap these feathers. Me personally, so here is your package side. This is the one that faces you as it's sitting on the skin. So I just pull them right up like that, and I'm going to go tie the tips in, and I'm going to have the package side facing forward. Other folks that you talk to, they'll say, oh, if you don't strip one side of them off, it's going to be too heavy. Other ones tie in by the stem. Other ones tie in like the stem, but then they'll also have the one side cut off. Me, I've never really found it to be more beneficial one way or the other. And I'm just going to strip off those feathers, and then I'm going to peel this back right about like that is what I'm after. So now I'm just going to straighten that out, and I'm going to cut that. I'm going to have just this little V section that I want to tie in. And once I get it up to the hook, if it's a little bit more than what I want, yeah, I'm going to peel that back just a little bit more. I want those just to be a little bit longer. So if it's more than what I want, you got two options really. You can take this off and recut it. I'm just going to peel that back slightly. So I just have one wrap over there, and I'm just going to move my feather back to where I'm able to cover everything up with these next thread wraps, and then tie everything in. You can see I've got a nice clean section right there. The head's nice and clean. I don't have any feathers coming forward, and I'll stand this up, I've got a little bit of stem right here before I get to the feathers that I'm going to use for my spin, and that's going to allow me to manipulate and control the direction that that feather goes. So I'm going to go with some hackle pliers here, and one thing to keep in mind, this portion that you tied in is very brittle. So if you put a ton of pressure on it, it's going to snap on you and it's done. Just keep in mind that you want to use very little pressure on this. So now there's my one rotation. That's going to get me to where I have my feathers, because my feathers are now coming through because of that section that I left exposed. So now there's one full wrap. Let me get those feathers back there. There's the one full wrap, and then I want a half coming right up to there. And don't worry about those feathers that are kicking off a little bit. We'll get those squared away. So there's the 1.5, and then I'm going to turn this around, trim that off. 1.5 wraps is typically what I go with on these. Anything more and it gets a little bit too heavy, anything less and it looks a little too sparse to me. So now all I want to do is just peel these fibers back. I want to form my thread head right there, and you can see they're all just laying back nice and clean for us. I'm going to whip finish this. This is about a 4-turn whip finish on this head, so it does stick out a little bit. And there's one fiber I may have to get rid of. It does stick out a little bit, but I like it this way. I like it with a little bit more of a thread head. You'll see a lot of them, and they're maybe you know, a quarter shorter than what I have here. But I just like the way that this looks, especially when I'm using an off-colored thread like I am with this maroon color. So cut that off. I like the way that it looks with the bigger head, the longer profile. It just sticks out a little bit more, and it also allows me to fold my feathers back a little bit more by taking about 2 thread wraps back my hook. So now I'll just preen these fibers out just a little bit. There may be 1 or 2 that need to come out, but that's a pretty dang good representation on what we're after there. Let me try and loosen this vise up a little bit. I have it clamped down because I've been tying bass poppers a lot here, and been doing a bunch of deer hair work, and the last thing that you want when you're doing that is your vise to go sliding around on you. So there, we'll turn that around and we'll get that against a better backdrop as well. Bring that up in the vise if we can. There we go. And you can see our, well, it's not Partridge. I used the Cote de Leon, but Partridge substitute. But there you can see those fibers are coming back about to where my tail starts. Damn flies. About to where my tail starts. The tail's a little bit longer than the shank of the hook, and then when this all comes together, once it gets wet, you're going to have that mottled black and brown going about the entire way back, and then you're going to have that cream body filling through it. Really gives a good representation, a really neat look as well, and then you've got like that red colored head to finish the fly off. Whatever color you really want to use, it's up to you. A lot of times when I do mine, I'll use like a Cahill or a pale orange is what I tie with a decent amount. When I'm doing when I'm tying these for bulk, that's what I'll do. I'll have one set color of thread, and it's usually like that pale orange or Cahill pale yellow type. But that is essentially your hare's ear soft hackle, and this applies to, you know, this style, the soft hackle. This applies, you can tailor it to, like I said, any Mayfly, any Caddis. If you want to do PMDs, if you want to do slate drakes, whatever it may be, just tailor it to that specific fly, and this platform will work for just about any emerge or imitation that's out there. But if you guys have any questions or comments on it, leave them with me and I'll get back to you. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll catch you next Wednesday.